open up that Crystal Pepsi and get comfortable. This is Dope Nostalgia.
Episode 235. This is the Dope Nostalgia podcast, and I'm your host, Naomi. Today, we have a guest that's completely different than what we normally do, and it's something I've been really excited to talk about. The psychology of music. How our brain uses music and understands music. Why do we get songs stuck in our heads? For instance, is nostalgia a good thing? Is it a bad thing? There's so many cool questions that we can ask our guest today, as she is a doctor and has done many interviews as well as studies on music. So here's our background information today on Dr. Kelly Jakubowski.
Wikipedia moment.
Dr. Kelly Jakubowski, PhD, is an assistant professor in music psychology at Durham University in the UK, where she co-directs the Music and Science Lab. She conducts research on a range of topics related to music and memory, including autobiographical memories evoked by music and earworms. Earworms are songs that get stuck in our heads. Holding degrees in both music and psychology, she takes a highly interdisciplinary approach to understanding both how we remember music and how musical memory can be understood in relation to broader psychological processes. She has published over 30 journal articles and book chapters on these topics. Her research has been featured in media outlets worldwide, including the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Guardian, and The Conversation. And she has made numerous radio appearances in both the UK and US. That right there, folks, was from the magazine Psychology Today. And I am very happy to welcome Kelly Jakubowski to Dope Nostalgia. Well, welcome, Dr. Jakubowski. Is that how I say your name?
Yeah, Jakubowski, exactly. Great.
Thank you. Welcome to, and thank you for making the time today to be on Dope Nostalgia. I learned about you online when researching what nostalgia was, and I saw a post that you had been included on, and I wanted to reach out to you to see if you would be able to have a conversation with me about that.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Happy to be here.
And I also want to congratulate you on last year's Early Career Award from the Society for Music Perception and Cognition. That's such a huge accolade.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Now, you're based out of the UK?
Yes, that's right. So I'm American, but I've been in the UK for 13 years or so. So yeah.
Yeah, you're so young. So you got so much more time to do all of your studies and research. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always limited on time, but yeah, I suppose there's many years to go.
Well, I know that an important part of your research has been finding the relationship between music and memories. And that would include reliving memories through songs. Can you tell me more about the research you have done so far?
Yeah, sure. So I'm really interested in the link. One of my main interests in my research is the link between music and autobiographical memories. So autobiographical memories are memories from our lives. So this could include, memories of particular people that have been involved in our lives, or events, or particular places that we perhaps had, experienced music before, and so on. So all of these kind of sort of biographical details from our lives, how does music become sort of entwined with these experiences in lots of really interesting and intricate ways?
It's quite amazing too what we can recall from the past, especially even from just a song. The ability to memorize lyrics and remember all of the lyrics to something 30 years later.
Yes, definitely. So I think there's this kind of really interesting link between the fact that music itself, once we kind of, once we've been exposed to a piece of music, a whole bunch of times, which, this happens quite often, the songs that we know really well, we've heard probably tens or hundreds of times. But, once we've kind of been exposed enough to a piece of music, we can remember it really, really well and really in vivid detail, even many, many years later.
Mm.
So we can, like you said, recall every lyric to a song that maybe we haven't heard since we were a teenager. Or we can, actually recall a lot of details about the music as well. So it's been shown that people can recall music actually really precisely in terms of like the actual pitch level, the tempo of the music, and so on. So there's lots of things that we remember really well about music itself. And I think this is kind of very inherently linked then to the fact that because we remember the music so well, we often also then remember sort of associated details from our lives. So obviously, in order for music to be an effective cue for memories from our lives in the first place, we need to remember the music as a starting point.
Mm.
And then this then can become associated with all sorts of other details about particular events, this particular party or this particular wedding that you went to, or so on and so forth.
I can do that. And I also feel like even just bring up like smells, like remembering a smell from a song or like just be like all of those things that were put you back in that place again.
Yep. Yeah, sure. So in terms of kind of autobiographical memories, a lot of times we don't just remember necessarily like the visual details of like what the place looked like or whatever. We can actually relive a lot of the sensory details. So you might, like you said, remember the sort of smells and tastes of particular things that, were eaten or smelled during that event. So a lot of these kind of detailed sort of sensory details come along with it. There's also, of course, a sort of broader link between music and other senses. So I have a postdoc who studies music and synesthesia, and this is a very kind of rare ability where music involuntarily triggers colors for people very consistently whenever they hear music. Particular notes or particular phrases or keys can cue particular colors for people. But it's been suggested that even though that's a really rare ability, that's something that actually is a kind of a continuum. So even of those of us that don't have synesthesia, we have this kind of cross-modal link between music and colors or scenes or smells and so on.
Hmm. It's just incredible. What part of the brain is responsible for this?
Yeah, so in terms of the sort of autobiographical memory experience, obviously you have to have if music is involved, there's some kind of auditory areas of the brain activated, but there's also an area called the medial prefrontal cortex that seems to be very highly implicated in recalling autobiographical memories, specifically in response to music.
Hmm.
So, for instance, Amy Belfi, who's one of my collaborators, she's done a study where she found that people that actually had damage to the medial prefrontal cortex, they had less vivid memories evoked by music. But actually, when you cued memories with other things like photographs of famous faces, they could recall those in quite vivid detail. So this does suggest that something about the link between music and memories is somehow specific to this area.
Now, the main focus of this show is music nostalgia. Now, is nostalgia unhealthy or negative in any way? Is it living in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, um, you know, t- obviously people experience nostalgia to varying degrees, and for many people it can be an adaptive experience or an adaptive emotion. Being able to kind of reflect on your past experiences, how they made you the person you are today, and how they might kind of shape you in the future. This can be, of course, a very productive thing. But there can also be kind of extremes of the continuum where people are kind of ruminating on the past, very, very focused on the past and not kind of being able to appreciate or see the present or think about the future and so on. So, as with many things, there's a sort of balance there. But I think the kind of general experience of nostalgia is seen as a sort of playing an adaptive function in our lives.
Yeah, and I feel like it can be a way for people to gather to, because I feel like it was a very popular thing to be nostalgic during the pandemic at a
Mhm.
time when it was difficult to make new memories and that familiarity was very comforting.
Yeah, no, definitely that was a really extreme and interesting case in which, a lot of people were going back and, watching TV shows from when they were teenagers, listening to music that was popular, 20 years ago or more.
Hmm.
So that, and people were also kind of creating recordings where they were, virtually recording together with other people, but often it was covers of kind of older songs rather than, coming up with new music and so on. So I think, and in that case, I suppose it's a sort of, COVID wasn't a, it wasn't a very pleasant experience for most people. So, remembering back to the past when we were having nicer times and we were able to gather with friends and family and so on. Of course, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yes, I would say so. And yeah, it's something that is a familiar bond with other people. So I know that a lot of musicians were also making new music too, and hopefully being productive and creative during that time. I think it was a bit of a mix of both.
Yeah, yeah, sure, definitely. I mean, there was definitely music coming out as there always is.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of interesting kind of joint projects going on where a lot of musicians were sort of collaborating on covers and kind of new versions of old songs as well. So yeah, definitely a balance of the two things.
And one of the things I found with my friends and myself is that we really tucked into our like tween years and our teen years and what we were listening to and doing.
Mhm.
I've always been a fan of boy bands, but we went right back into being those kids again who loved our favorite boy bands. And we made a lot of new friends and got together over things like New Kids on the Block, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, all of that. There was a comfort in that. Is there a weird thing with the boy band phenomenon and how they affect teens the way they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some degree it's kind of propagating things that, have happened before, which is that people do tend to get quite emotional and associate a lot of kind of really positive memories with music from when they were a teenager, regardless of whether
Mm.
it was a boy band or, some other kind of music. So we've seen in psychology research this phenomenon of the reminiscence bump. So the reminiscence bump is essentially people have more vivid and more important memories tend to come from that period of time when we've shown in relation to music, this peaks around sort of age 14. So these are our kind of most salient music evoked autobiographical memories kind of peak around that time. So part of it, I would say, is not necessarily just about the boy band experience. Of course,
Mm.
I think there's always within each music generation, though, there's always some factors, I suppose, that bring people together around a certain kind of a certain culture or around a certain, phenomenon of this kind of, I mean, I suppose, people, especially a lot of girls, went a bit crazy about the boy bands at that particular time. But if you think back to, the Beatles, there was a similar kind of thing around them
Yeah.
as a different kind of boy band, right?
It could be anything that starts community, I think, I guess. Because
Yeah, and I
it
think
could be a rock band,
sure.
it could be a classical artist. I don't know. It just I guess something that creates community and brings people who share the same interests together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Taylor Swift is one example of, the Swifties really kind of being able to kind of bring people together to sort of feel united in an experience.
Yeah. Now, one thing I've always noticed and felt is that some of us stop listening to new music as we age. And I find that there was like a cutoff point at a certain point in my life where I just didn't care about what was coming out anymore. Finding that new music is all the same, or some people will say, oh, that new music sucks. Why was music the best in our developing years, regardless of what generation you belong to? You always think, nope, mine was the best.
Yeah. Yeah, so this does also partially relate to this idea of the reminiscence bump that, that's, a lot of our most important memories with music were kind of solidified during that period when we were teenagers. Also, that's just a period when we're kind of most sort of open to new experiences in music developmentally. We're sort of forming our musical identity and also our personal identity beyond music, right? But then, kind of once that's sort of solidified, it doesn't change as much. And it's a similar thing with your sort of general personal identity. Once you're sort of, I don't know, 20 to 25, your personality isn't going to like, or who you kind of define yourself as isn't going to change like a huge amount after that.
Mm.
I suppose you add elements to your identity, maybe you become a parent or something like that, that sort of adds beyond what you were before. And then you might integrate some of the preferences of your child or so on, but probably it more operates the
Hmm.
opposite way, where we try and influence our children with the music that we like.
Oh, it probably
Rather-
goes both ways. I mean,
Sorry.
I'm someone who's not a parent, so maybe that's why I'm more stuck in my ways because I imagine if you have a child, they're going to school, they're coming back with like, oh, you got to check out this song by Taylor Swift or whatever. You're going to be more exposed.
Hmm. Yeah, probably. I mean, my kid is only 5, so she only listens to like the Paw Patrol music at this stage. But I'm sure she'll get into pop music, and I'll see if it influences me or not.
Nice. Is music helpful or harmful for people suffering with dementia and Alzheimer's? What have you found?
Yeah, so I don't specifically do research myself on Alzheimer's disease, but a lot
Mm.
of people have been looking at Alzheimer's and dementia more broadly in relation to music. There's a lot of positive evidence in terms of that music can be beneficial in a lot of different ways for people with dementia. And some of this is not just specific to memory. So music, of course, plays a huge like emotion regulation role in our lives as well, of course. And it's been shown that music can reduce symptoms like agitation and dementia quite consistently, which doesn't necessarily have to do with memory, is more maybe just about kind of how it makes you feel and so on. There's also some studies looking at, the degree to which people are able to remember music and associated memories. So it's been shown that, even into the fairly late stages of dementia, some people can really remember pieces of music really well, even when they have, for instance, forgotten, particular family members and so on and so forth. They
Mm.
still show some identification that they can sing along with a song, or they might even still be able to play the piano and so on and so forth. Um, there's also a bit of research suggesting that music can be a better cue for autobiographical memories than some other types of stimuli. So there's Amy Baird has led several studies about this topic in Australia, and she found that, for instance, music was a better cue for autobiographical memories than photographs of famous events. So she showed people, photographs of kind of key events that had happened in their lives,
Mm.
sort of shared key events like, I'm not sure what they were in Australia, but, things like the Twin Towers going down or, particular kind of cultural events that people would have known, and also played them, music from similar periods, and found that people had more memories and sort of more robust memories in response to the music than in response to the sort of event photos. So this does suggest that music has a bit of this kind of spared influence on our memories, even throughout the sort of earlier stages of dementia.
It sounds like it's one of the strongest sensory. I don't know how to word this, but
A
one of the
sensory
definitely,
cue, yeah, yeah,
yeah, cute.
yeah.
Thank you.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Hi. If you enjoyed Dope Nostalgia, thank you. Consider becoming a Patreon subscriber today for as little as $1 a month. It helps keep the show on the air and rolling. So if you want to check out our Patreon, it's at patreon.com/dope nostalgia. $1 a month, and you'll be helping support one of your favorite podcasts.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Nick.
I'm Drew.
I'm Jeff, and we are 98 Degrees.
And you're listening to the Dope Nostalgia Podcast.
Throw on your Jinkos, Baby Tees, and Doc Martens, grab your Lisa Frank Trapper Keeper, and join Jackie and Danielle on a journey to the late 90s as we reminisce about the movies of our youth on the No More Late Fees podcast. Don't forget your flannel and butterfly clips. And remember, be kind and rewind.
Excuse me, are those Bugle Boy jeans that you're wearing?
Oh, yes. They are Bugle Boy jeans.
Thank you.
Now, of course, there's the whole getting songs stuck in your head. And I learned that you developed an engineered track called the Earworm Eraser. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I can't take full credit for it. I was commissioned as a scientific consultant for the company Atlassian, who they were basically just trying to solve a lot of kind of interesting and quirky problems. And one was this idea that it's impossible to get rid of a song that's stuck in your head. And they wanted to create a track that got rid of earworms. And so basically what I did is kind of explain to them about some research I had done about how people try to get rid of their earworms and what are the features of songs that tend to get stuck in people's heads. And we sort of reverse engineered trying to create a track that wasn't going to be sticky itself, but could kind of block out the earworm. So yeah, that's available on YouTube, and you can try it out if you want to see if it works for you. A lot of people have commented that it works, and some have commented that it doesn't. So I can't promise 100%.
But what a unique idea. It's amazing. You're reminding me of like when you've at like Bath and Body Works and you've smelled too many smells and you need some coffee beans. Like it feels like this is the coffee beans, like a reset.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's the kind of idea, is like a sort of auditory reset. So like, you have some other sounds stuck in your mind you can't get rid of. You need to just sort of that's why it's called an eraser. You need to sort of flush it out with other sounds to try and get rid of it and so on.
It's not necessarily a bad thing though to have a song stuck in your head either.
No, and actually that's one of the most consistent findings in research on earworms, is that most of the time we don't really mind them. We probably remember the times that they were really annoying more often, just because, like when you're really annoyed, it kind of catches your attention and you're like, oh, I can't stand Baby Shark in my head anymore. But
it's usually a song that you don't like.
Yeah. But actually about 2/3 of the time people find their earworm experiences about, a pleasant or neutral experience. They don't really mind it. A lot of times it's just songs that we have listened to ourselves that we like that get stuck in our heads.
How do we explain getting sick of a song that we used to love?
That's a great question. I mean, so there's a few research studies kind of looking into this experience that, to a point, listening to a song over and over generally increases our liking of it to a point. But then at a certain point, we're kind of saturated, we know the music well enough. There's no kind of surprises or unexpected elements anymore. Or it's just sort of overexposure. I suppose that can happen with anything, not just music, right? That, if you, I don't know, taking the same route to work every day gets old, so I suppose it's a similar kind of thing where there's always this kind of what we call a sort of inverted U shape, where like exposure increases our liking of something to a certain point, but then at another point, it's just too much and we don't like it anymore. So that's been shown for other things besides music in psychology research as well.
So you can't have steak for dinner every single night and still appreciate it, right?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's a good example.
There's also the ability for some people to play something like Name That Tune and listen to one or two notes and be able to guess the song like that.
Mhm.
Um, is is that just really good cognitive ability with music?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Part of that, so that is a really kind of common thing that a lot of people can do, and that's actually there's been some experiments. So Carol Krumhansel was one of the first people that did this, what was called the Plink experiment, where she played clips of music that were less than half a second long to people, and around kind of 25 to 50% of the time they were able to identify these like really, really short clips. And so it is a kind of common ability. And I actually do this like in my lectures a lot as well, just play these really short clips. And my students are always like, oh yeah, that's Bohemian Rhapsody, that's a really easy one, actually, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Hmm.
So, part of that is just our kind of overexposure and really kind of like what I said at the beginning about we just tend to know music really really well because of the many times we've heard familiar songs and so on. But part of it is also I think in how people write and engineer music, right? So people specifically want to catch their listeners in the first couple seconds so they don't turn the dial over on the radio, or so they don't, in this day and age, they don't switch to a different, playlist or to the next song in the playlist or
Oh yeah.
whatever, all these things you can do on Spotify. Um, it is partially a feature of music that composers and producers of music really do think about catching you in the first couple seconds and making that really memorable.
Is there a reason why some songs are catchy and some aren't? Or is that just relative to the person and their tastes?
So it's a bit of both. Unsurprisingly, like I said, people tend to get music that they know really well stuck in their heads that they really like and are familiar with and so on because they've been exposed to it so many times and so on. But we've also found that there are some musical features that predict whether certain songs are likely to become earworms or not.
Hmm.
So we found that, for instance, like more upbeat songs tend more often to become earworms than sort of, slow dirges and so on. You can probably
Yeah.
relate to this. And this also seems to kind of align with the speed at which we sort of like to move in general. So, songs that are sort of easy to dance to or move to might be more likely to get stuck in our heads as well.
Hmm.
And we've also found that there's some features of the kind of melodies, so like the pitch changes in the music that predict earworminess of music as well. So songs that have more kind of generic pitch contours, so the sort of ups and downs in the melody are fairly predictable
Hmm.
overall. That tends to also be one of the predictors of earworm experiences as well.
And this is how you write a hit. Everyone take note. Some people are really
Yeah.
good at it.
Yeah, I mean to be honest, I think hit songwriters already know a lot of these things intuitively, and I think what scientists are doing is just kind of catching up at this stage
Yeah.
with what hit songwriters already know.
It's really interesting to learn the science of why we do things the way we do musically. Um, I know some people are able to listen to a song and not even pay attention to the lyrics, but they love the song. I've like loved certain songs for 20 years and then didn't even realize what they were talking about. And
Yeah.
then there's people who don't care about the music and they just pick their favorite songs just from the lyrics.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And different people have different preferences in that regard as well. I'm one that doesn't tend to listen that closely to lyrics either. And
Mm.
I think I'm not exactly sure why some people do more than others. I guess maybe people can ascribe meaning for different reasons, right? I mean, so the beauty of a particular chord progression or a particular instrumentation and so on, it doesn't really matter what the lyrics are. Some people are just attracted to the sort of melodic features of the music or the kind of timbres that are used and so on. Other people
Mm.
are really very, very focused on the words.
Yeah. And you are a musician. I
Uh,
understand
Yeah.
What do you play? What all do you play
Yeah, I play the violin primarily. Yeah.
primarily? Oh, being a musician, I have to ask you, what is the actual difference between absolute pitch and relative pitch? And how would one know if they have it? Because I think I have relative pitch, but if you told me to sing a G, I wouldn't be able to do it. But if
Yeah.
you know what I mean, but I think I can sing something I heard on the radio in the proper original key, possibly.
Hmm.
So
Oh, I
what's the
see.
difference?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So absolute pitch, the sort of traditional definition is that you can hear like a single pitch, brr, and label, what that pitch is.
Mm,
Um, and or you're able to do what you just said, which is I could say sing a G and you would be able to sing that.
mm,
So that's the sort of traditional definition, and that's a sort of quite rare ability. The
hmm.
sort of original estimate is 1 in 10,000 people have this ability, and so on.
Wow.
But there's a sort of variant of absolute pitch, which is what we sometimes call sort of implicit absolute pitch, which is the other thing that you described, which is that actually a lot of people they can hear a familiar song and say, actually, that's at the wrong pitch level, that's been pitch shifted. Or they
Yep.
can, if I say, sing one of your favorite pop songs, they can actually do that really close to the right pitch level. So that is actually a sort of variant of absolute pitch because you are remembering the actual level of the pitch. But you can only do it in the kind of context of a sort of whole song, and it has to be something
Right.
that's quite well known to you, and so on and so forth. So it's these things, it does seem to be like a bit of a sort of spectrum, just like I said about, sort of synesthesia and so on, that there's this kind of spectrum of abilities.
It's amazing what the brain can do and remember. I mean, I remember taking intervals in ear training, and a
Mhm.
lot of people were just, consider what we did cheating because we would just pick a song that was a fifth,
Mhm.
like, and
Yeah.
twinkle, twinkle. Like you would just pick a
Yeah.
song and that's how you would cheat.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think that's cheating. I mean, a lot of people initially get taught that in the first place, that that's how to recognize particular intervals, and then
Mhm.
maybe you kind of don't need to think of twinkle twinkle eventually once you get better at identifying a fifth. But I think yeah, I think that's fine.
I also noticed sometimes odd time signatures can make people feel physically uncomfortable. Like if it's not in 4/4 time, it's not a comfortable experience to listen to, possibly for some. Even some jazz music can make people feel unsettled.
Hmm.
And do you find that that's a phenomenon or no?
I mean, that's not something I've personally kind of looked at much in
Yeah.
my experience. I think probably, so what we would call enculturation plays a really big role in this.
Mm,
So you're probably mainly talking about people who have listened to a lot of, for instance, Western pop music and so on, that tends to be in 3/4 time, often 4/4 time. And but there's other musical traditions, like in Bulgaria or the Balkans or so on, where they actually, things like 7/8 time are really common,
mm,
and there have been, perceptual studies showing that, people from these other traditions, they actually are just as good at identifying and kind of noticing changes and very small scale kind of rhythm perception tasks. They're just as good at doing them in 7/8 as they are in 4/4. So I do
mm.
think, yes, this is probably a thing that, that does happen in the listeners that you've described, but it is partially not something that we're not inborn with. It's more about our musical culture.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I would say, what are your current studies and projects coming up? What have you been working on?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm working on a sort of large project about sort of music and imagination more broadly. So not just focusing on memories of real events, but
Mm,
what do people think about when they're listening to music in general? So and sometimes that might be memories from their lives, but sometimes this is imagining sort of fictional stories or making up sort of detailed narratives. Sometimes that could be just imagining some kind of floating blobs of color or some sort of physical sensations and so on. So what we're really interested in is kind of the diversity of experiences that people report in their thoughts when listening to music, and how that relates to features of the music, like, are certain genres of music or certain music with certain characteristics more likely to evoke, for instance, these kind of detailed narratives versus more abstract shapes and so on and so forth.
Who are your favorite music artists, and what genres do you like to listen to and play?
Okay. Yeah, so I'm mainly trained as a classical musician originally. So I do still like a lot of classical music. I love Prokofiev, Bach, a bit of Beethoven. But I also more recently, well, not that recently really, but I've played in folk bands and bluegrass bands and so on and so forth.
Nice.
So I played at few years back. I was playing at Cambridge Folk Festival and got to see like the Punch Brothers and bands like that as well, and that's super fun as well. So yeah, it's nice to be able to play a variety of music for sure.
Can people help contribute to your projects and studies in any way? People who are interested, what would they have to do?
Sure, yeah.
Where would we direct them?
Yeah, so we have a website which is musicscience.net, pretty easy to find. You can learn more about our ongoing projects there. I am currently on Blue Sky and Facebook as well, so you can find me there. And just check out my university profile. But if we have studies up and running, you'll probably find them on the website anyway.
This has been fascinating, and you're so incredibly talented, and I feel honored to have had the chance to talk to you about all of this today. Thank you for being so open to my questions.
Oh, thank you. No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
You can follow Dope Nostalgia on Instagram at dope_nostalgia and YouTube at Dope Nostalgia Podcast. Call and leave a message on our voicemail toll free. The number is 1-888-741-9192.
This podcast is licensed by SOCAN because we believe that artists should be paid for their work.
Hey there, music lovers. Did you know that getting licensed to share music online is not just the right thing to do? It's also super important for supporting creators and the music industry. That's why we're proud to be licensed by SOCAN, a copyright collective that grants licenses for online music broadcasts in Canada. By getting licensed through SOCAN, you ensure that every beat, every note, and every melody that you play is compliant and fair to the creators. Join us in supporting the music community. Visit SOCAN's website at www.socan.com and get your web radio, podcast, or any other use of online music licensed today. Let's stream beautiful music together, legally and ethically. SOCAN. Music, people, connected.
Hey friends. I kind of miss getting those messages on my answering machine like we used to back in the day. What I'd really love is to hear from you, the listeners of Dope Nostalgia. This is your chance to be on the show, giving feedback, telling us what you love, what you hate, and who you'd like to see more of. Call us at our new toll-free number, 1-888-741-9192. Leave us some feedback. Your message could be played on the show. So give us a call, 1-888-741-9192. Toll free.